Welcome to Manhattan Project. This is day 30.
Tonight, Evan and I went back to the Angelica Film Center, a place we've been before, to go to a Q&A special screening of Lake Bell, the director. I know she acts, but she's also the director. Her new movie, I Do Until I Don't, or what? That's what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. Take a look. Where are we at?
The Angelica.
Again? Why?
Because we're going to a Q&A for I Do Until I Don't, the Lake Bell movie.
You can see the poster right there. Well, exposure's a bitch.
So, I Do Until I Don't tells the story of a documentary filmmaker who's trying to make a documentary about how marriage is an outdated institution and how it should end by focusing on 3 different couples all living in Florida. The documentary filmmaker tries to manipulate them to get her results, and a lot of comedy and drama ensues. Why don't you take a look at the trailer?
How often do you sleep with other people?
All the time.
How great are they?
They're so fun.
What is this?
Early anniversary.
Is it anthrax?
Will you accept that marriage is dead?
We're all gonna do it.
Are we talking about sex?
No one's talking about sex. It's not like that.
So, John, what were your expectations for this film?
So, the trailer was interesting enough to me. It's got a lot of players that I usually like. Mary Steenburgen is in this thing. Lake Bell, I've always enjoyed as both a performer and with her first movie, In a World, that she directed a couple of years ago. That's about like movie trailer voiceovers, and like it's her trying to be like the first female one. I like that movie a lot, so I know she has a lot of talent. I saw that this movie wasn't getting a huge release. I was kind of curious what the budget level was. I assumed small, but at the very least, that shouldn't really paint my expectation on the quality of the film. So I was pretty optimistic that I would at the very least find it to be an interesting perspective or take, something really at least kind of funny. Because like I said, I like Lake Bell a lot, and the fact that she's anchoring this movie both as a director and a performer, always a good thing. Until right before the movie started, when I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes, just because I was curious, and I saw that it was like a 30 on Rotten Tomatoes. And as the credits started and the lights went down and the movie was about to begin, I started to think, oh, maybe this isn't going to be great. Maybe not.
I Do Until I Don't is, unfortunately, a poorly paced, fairly unfunny comedy that relies too hard on its obnoxious characters and simplistic ideas that don't even make much sense at the end of the day. Do you agree, John?
Yeah, unfortunately. There's a movie that I wanted to root for, especially seeing the Q&A after. Lake Bell is just such a charming person, and clearly she put a lot of heart into this movie. This wasn't some bullshit slapped together to make a paycheck. It was very low budget. And unfortunately, despite having a lot of talented players here, the movie plays more obnoxious than endearing most of the time. We have these like pretty broadly written characters that are also equally broadly performed that are just so unlikable. They do a good job of making you feel the tension that can happen in a marriage or a relationship of any kind over X amount of years, and like how someone can get tired of each other. And those scenes feel pretty authentic, but the problem is from those scenes and the scenes surrounding it where the marriage is supposed to be like stable, so to speak, you don't really buy how these people got in this relationship to begin with. So like, Jesus Christ, like they seem, everyone in this film, except for like the one Wyatt, whatever, and
Wyatt,
Amber
Cenac,
Heard.
and Amber Heard. They're like a hippie couple.
Who are like supposed to be like the one functioning couple. Aside from them, it's just like, I feel like all these relationships, I'm like, neither person is like written or fleshed out enough for me to feel like they were real people, and I definitely don't buy them being together.
I think a big problem with this movie also is its relationship with plot as opposed to just like scenes of the characters acting. They set up a bunch of threads that they don't follow through on, or their version of conclusion doesn't really make much sense with what the stakes are. You have a big financial problem between Ed Helms and Lake Bell. It has the old cliche of the husband doesn't tell his wife financial issues, even though in the first scene they are talking about financial issues. So it seems like she is aware of the situation until she's not. And then they just kind of forget that. It's like, whatever, that'll get resolved. The other thing is that between Paul Reiser and Mary Steenburgen, Steinberg, she's agreed with the documentary filmmaker that she's going to do certain manipulative things for the documentary, like have a separation, all this stuff, and they just don't get into that at all. It's like, what's the point? It even happens on a comedic level. Like, there's so many little things set up that don't happen, and I don't know if it's because of editing, if they're taken out of the movie or what, but I wish I wasn't even thinking about that stuff in the movie because I was enjoying it, but I wasn't really enjoying it, so it made it even easier to think about problems like that.
And I think her character speaks to other issues with the movie, which is that Mary Steenburgen, someone that I really like in general, was so obnoxious in this movie. Her voice is just grating. I don't know what it is with the mix, but basically her character's function throughout almost the entire runtime is just to like hold a complete, just utter contempt for her husband or anyone else in her life and just be judgmental and shitty. And you're like, man, this is not a cool way to paint like characters, especially not female characters. Why am I supposed to like this woman? Like, give me something other than just like her incessant complaining and just like talking about how awful her husband is. Meanwhile, her husband, who's played by Paul Reiser, is seen as like someone who's going through a midlife crisis, or at least, again, pretty broadly, like he does the very cliche thing of getting a motorcycle, which is supposed to signify he has a midlife crisis. And rather than like discussing the fact that like maybe he's taking out his crisis in like selfish ways that don't consider the fact that he's in a relationship, whether it be financially or regarding safety or the way he spends his time, rather than doing anything like that or show like why his midlife crisis would be problematic, or at the very least converse about it, try to understand it, Mary Steenburgen just kind of like shits all over him and just like rolls her eyes at the entire idea of like the cliche that he is. And then it's like, does the movie think it's funny to do that? Like, is Paul Reiser the bad guy and we're supposed to be laughing at him because he's a man and he's being kind of cliche? Or are we supposed to like think that she's a bitch? If so, she doesn't really redeem herself later. It seems like we're supposed to root for her and the rest of the people in that relationship and like with her daughter and whatnot. So kind of an issue, right? A movie that's filled with characters that you don't really want to root for or care for. And then I think Lake Bell's character kind of has the opposite issue of Mary Steenburgen. She's not obnoxious, but she's unbelievably timid, right? And it's like sitcom level where it's like, is a person really this timid?
Within this whole subgenre of like relationship comedies, like these James L. Brooks movies, where you see all these different people and stuff, they're supposed to be heartwarming and endearing, and they're supposed to, by having different couples, provide a lot of different access points for you to relate to it. I mean, this is a weird movie that has strong performers performing characters who aren't strong.
Yeah.
So if you dislike the choices they make, it just confronts you so often. You're like, why'd they have to act that way in that scene? Why'd they have to say that? Like, that's not like making this a movie I want to watch.
And perhaps the worst part of this movie, at least for me, is how close it gets to actually saying some interesting things, being subversive, or at the very least putting forth an idea or an opinion or showcasing the different ideologies that can be very valid going into a relationship. Like the movie makes a point, and like Belle talked about it, like not being judgy on whether you go through a separation, whether you're in an open relationship, whether you're in a happily married monogamous relationship, whatever it is, like there's no right solution for everyone. So I'm not going to spoil it, but the movie thinks it's about that or seems to be about that, and there are scenes where it talks about open relationships and talks about divorce in broad ways that are kind of progressive, but ultimately at the end I couldn't help but walk away from this movie with what they did with the characters and these conclusions and think, wow, Lake Bell brings up all these interesting ideas of how marriage comes in all different shapes and sizes and forms, and yet she just wants you to walk away thinking like, but old school monogamous relationship between a man and a woman that stay together and work out their issues is the right way, and that's the happy ending, and that's the only happy ending, and that's how you should feel leaving. It's like, that just left me feeling so cold. It's like, damn, this movie really could have been and almost is a pretty decent, at least, attempt at a dissection on the different varieties of marriage, and it isn't, right?
Well, and sadly, some of the movies that this movie calls back to, which are from 20, 30 years ago, are more brave in that way. They have those conclusions where characters don't stay together or stuff like that.
It's a disappointing movie because it's close to being good a lot. If it was just bad, if it was just shitty, if it felt lazy, you'd hate on it hard and that'd be fun. But it's not, and that's what's kind of sad about it. I really, really hope Lake Bell comes out and does something else that just works more for me, because she's done things that have worked for me in the past. And like I said, I think as a director, she's really strong. If I had to say anything that's good about this movie, I think the visual language is really strong. The art direction is awesome. There's like a lot of really interesting shots in this movie. Her composition is tight. It doesn't feel like someone who was an actor, saw directors direct, and was like, I think I could do that, and then just made a shitty movie. She directs. There's a really good, strong style in here.
And just like the sense of place, like Belle's from New York. She's probably been to Florida, but it really feels like a movie made by someone who understands like what living in Florida is like. So. Also,
before we go, Dorota saw it with us. Hey, Dorota.
Yeah?
What did you think of I Do Until I Don't?
I liked it. It was fun and happy and optimistic, even though it was a little long.
So yeah, it's good to know that Evan and I aren't the only authority on movies around here, and Dorota did like it, and so I think some audience members will like it. I think our audience our audience overall liked it. The movie, the folks that we were with. Sometimes it's hard to gauge because you get that round of applause when the directors is there. But there seemed to be some warmth to it. They laughed at the jokes more than we did.
Yeah.
So my recommendation for this movie, honestly, I can't recommend it. I'd say it's probably a skip. What I will say is if you are interested in seeing this or you have nothing to see right now, go rent In a World, Lake Bell's first movie, because that movie is really good, and its credit song is the greatest song ever written. Well, this is like going to a friend's family reunion, and you're like, oh, I'll fit in easy. Just like everyone's got the wacky grandma, everyone's got the uncle, everyone's got whatever, and you get there and you're like, this is actually kind of awkward. Like, this ain't how my family works. Like, I don't think it's that bad, but at the same time, like, I shouldn't be here.
All right, well, I accept that invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We're the Manhattan Project.
We set out to review a movie every day for a month just to see if we could do it, and then maybe talk about doing a more consistent schedule for like a longer period of time. And tomorrow
will be 31 days.
We'll have done it. Yeah. That's a month. So tune in for a video updating you on what our opinions are on the channel, where we think we're going to go next, and then a bunch of vlogs from Toronto International Film Festival next week. Because later this week we are setting out to drive up to the Great White North and go once again to the Toronto International Film Festival. There's going to be a lot of fun content on this channel. My point is, if you're new here, please subscribe. If you haven't already, check out our original channel, The Devil's Advocates, link in the description, where we disagree with Rotten Tomatoes. That's like our main channel. This is our offshoot. But yeah.
It's been a good month.
It's been a good month.